Hi everyone, back with Bassington. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all keeping safe. A friend of mine who is a stockbroker gave me some very sound advice a few years ago. And that advice is as follows. It's not knowing when to buy, it's knowing when to sell. I believe that the sports model watches for Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, and all models for Rolex are currently at overinflated prices on the grey market. And my advice to you is to sell. Now, certain, or I should say some, grey market dealers will say, don't sell your watch unless you have to. And when they mean by that, don't sell your watch unless you have to access money. And that is actually very sound advice in itself. However, I believe that these dealers want to artificially inflate the market. What I mean by that, they do not want to see a sudden influx in supply of these watches, because that will lead to a reduction in the demand and consequently the price will fall. I believe that a watch is designed to be worn. It shouldn't be used as an investment item at all. However, I do respect those people who've decided to invest in watches. There is nothing wrong with that. So why have we ended up in this scenario? Because it has only really happened over the last 6 to 7 years. It is something that is very recent. It is not something that is long-standing. It has occurred gradually over the last 30 to 40 years. Well, I think there's various factors for this. The first factor is that the aforementioned brands of Rolex, Patek Philippe, and Audemars Piguet are independently owned. They are privately owned companies. They are not publicly quoted companies. Most other watch brands are owned by large groups, and in particular there are three: Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, Richemont, and the Swatch Group, and all three companies are publicly listed. That means they are accountable to their shareholders, whereas Rolex, Patek, and AP have no accountability to the shareholders. Consequently, they have far greater autonomy. It means they can decide what models to produce, what models not to produce, and how to control the distribution. A good example of this is what is happening currently with Audemars Piguet. They are pulling every single authorized dealer within the UK, and they are going to go to boutique only. The second reason is the influencers on social media, and particularly those guys and girls on YouTube and Instagram. And over the last 6 or 7 years, they have really promoted, they haven't been paid, but they have certainly promoted the brands of Rolex, Patek, and AP. They've always said, stay with the steel sports models, in particular within those brands. They've said they're very good brands, very good watchmakers. You won't lose any money on them. And anybody who's followed that advice, picked up on it 6 or 7 years ago, will have done very nicely. Congratulations to those guys and girls who promoted those brands. You have done an enormous favor to people who will have followed that advice. But that is a big influence, in my opinion, on why the grey market has grown and grown substantially within the prices that these watches are trading at. The third reason is we've been in a global pandemic for the last 2 years. And the result of that is people like to take their investments out of paper assets and put it into more tangible assets, such as precious metals, such as classic cars, art, fine wine, and watches. And that has led to a dramatic rise in watch prices in general within the last 2 years. The final reason is the criminal activity that is occurring within watches. And what I mean by that, I don't mean about the mindless thugs who are mugging people in order to get their hands on a Rolex watch. No, I mean the criminal gangs who've seen it as a very good way to launder large amounts of cash and to transport large amounts of cash. For instance, the Green Dial Patek Nautilus has a list price of £26,870. The cheapest I could find that watch for sale was £540,000. Wow. But that's a great way to these criminal gangs to launder that cash and to transport that cash. Transporting something that has a value of in excess of $500,000 that is sat on your wrist, fantastic way. So those are the reasons why we've ended in this scenario. Why do I think that the market is going to turn, or at the very least tighten up? Well, there are various factors due to that as well. The first factor is back to the pandemic. Yes, we've been in this global pandemic for the last 2 years, and the UK government in particular has borrowed large amounts of money in order to support the economy. You know, we've had grants, we've had business bounce back loans, we've had the furlough scheme. And the consequence of this is that we're going to see an increase in taxes because this money needs to be repaid. In addition, inflation is starting to creep up, and there will no doubt be interest rate rises. And that means that the repayments of this money, as well as in the form of increased taxation, will also be higher. But also, you know, your mortgage repayments will be higher. Consequently, people need to increase their income. And if they have a luxury watch or 2 luxury watches, that's a great way to release equity, to pay for the increase in taxes and probably the increase in the loans and the mortgage repayments, which I think will be inevitable. The second reason is that there may perhaps be a turning within the grey market. I was on the phone yesterday to a grey market dealer who dealt very heavily within Rolex. And he told me, he said, the thing is, there are thousands upon thousands of Rolex Daytonas, GMTs, Submariners on the grey market. It just depends on what price you're willing to pay. And he said the sellers have got very, very greedy, and he is starting to refuse to pay these prices and instead is looking at other luxury watch brands where he believes there is way better value. In particular, he thinks there is way better value for his customers. You know, the last thing he wants to do is sell a watch that in 3 to 5 years in time, 5 years time, has depreciated like a lead balloon. He wants to be able to look his customer in the eye and say, you will not lose out on this watch. Now, I know that's only a microcosm, but I think that that will be wider than one grey market dealer. And the third factor is insurance. Yes, I was on the phone to an authorized dealer of various luxury watch brands last week, and he was informing me that the insurance companies are refusing to insure the true value of the watches. So if we go back to that green dial Patek Nautilus, they will not insure to the value of £540,000. No, they will only insure to the value of the list price, which is £26,870. Wow. Well, imagine if you lost that watch or had it stolen and the payout was just £26,870. You would be pretty upset. So those are the reasons why I think the market will start to tighten up. We may not be at the peak of the market. It may have growth. We may be at the peak of the market. I can't tell you that, but this is just what I feel of where we are at this moment in time. However, there are still bargains to be had, and there are bargains to be had within these brands. And I will highlight a particular bargain of a watch that is by one of these brands. I will do that in a later vlog. In the meantime, stay safe and stay tuned.